I'm Leo Anderson. I'm 30 years old, and my own sister called security to throw me out of her wedding, calling me a defective item in front of everyone. Before I tell you how that moment ended with my father begging me for $120,000, do me a favor and let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. It's always amazing to see how far these stories travel. It all happened at the Grand Astoria Hotel, one of those places where the air smells like money and old leather. The chandeliers didn't just light the room. They dripped with crystals, casting a golden, judgmental glow on the polished marble floors. The faint, elegant notes of a string quartet floated from the main ballroom, a soundtrack for a life I was never meant to be a part of. My wife, Clara, and I were there for my younger sister Isabella's wedding. To be honest, calling them her friends was generous. They were her courtiers, and she was their queen. Clara had been the one to convince me. "It's about showing them we've moved on, Leo," she'd said the night before, her voice gentle as she straightened my tie in the mirror. "We're not hiding. You're not hiding." I wish I hadn't listened. I just stepped out of the restroom, the quiet hum of the hand dryer fading behind me. I was adjusting my tie, trying to psych myself up to rejoin the crowd, when a voice, sharp and cold as a shard of ice, sliced through the pleasant chatter. "Oh, look what the cat dragged in. A defective item." I froze mid-motion. My blood ran cold. That phrase, it wasn't just an insult. It was a brand. I hadn't heard it spoken aloud in almost a decade, but it hit me with the force of a physical blow, knocking the air from my lungs. I turned slowly, and there she was, Isabella, a vision in a wedding dress that probably cost more than my first car, a cloud of white silk and meticulously arranged lace. But her face, framed by the soft veil, was twisted into the same familiar, ugly sneer I knew from childhood. "What are you doing here?" she hissed, her voice a low, venomous whisper that carried more menace than a shout. Before I could even find my voice to form a response, she lunged forward and grabbed my arm, her perfectly manicured nails digging into the fabric of my suit. "I knew it. You snuck in, didn't you? Hoping to get a free meal and some champagne." A woman in a lavender dress, our mother, Eleanor, glided to her side. "Isabella, darling, don't cause a scene." But her eyes, cold and dismissive, were locked on me, reinforcing her daughter's words. "Leo, this is a private event. You should know your place." Then came my father, Richard, with the groom, a smug-looking guy named Mark, trailing in his wake. My father didn't even grant me a glance. He just nodded at Isabella, a silent command. "Handle it, honey." That was all the permission she needed. Isabella's voice rose, becoming shrill and theatrical, designed for the audience of nearby guests. "Security, security, get this suspicious person out of my wedding. He's trespassing. He's going to ruin everything." Heads turned. The polite murmur of conversation died instantly. Every eye in that opulent lobby was on me, a man in a tailored suit being publicly accused of being a vagrant by his own family. Humiliation, hot, thick, and suffocating, washed over me. In that instant, I was no longer a 30-year-old man. I was that lost, worthless 10-year-old boy all over again. Just as a burly security guard in a tight suit started moving towards us, his expression a mixture of duty and pity, a calm, clear voice cut through the tension. "Leo, there you are." It was Clara, my wife. She walked towards us, her steps measured and confident, her expression unreadable. And the storm that was my family paused, just for a second, to see who had dared to interrupt their execution. Seeing Clara's face, so full of strength, was like being thrown a lifeline. But for a split second, the current of the past was too strong, and it dragged me back to the moments where that word, defective, was first forged. It wasn't just a random insult Isabella had spat out in anger. It was my official, unspoken title in the Anderson household. It was the explanation for my existence. I remember one specific incident from when I was 12. It was the annual school science fair. I had worked for weeks on my project, a detailed, working model of a volcanic eruption, complete with baking soda and vinegar lava, and a carefully researched presentation on tectonic plates. I was so proud of it, I'd spent my own allowance money on the materials because my father had called it a silly distraction. On the day of the fair, the gymnasium was buzzing with energy. Parents were walking around, looking at the projects, their faces beaming with pride. My parents came, but they didn't come for me. Isabella, who was in 4th grade, had a project too. A poster board with some leaves glued to it, titled, "The Trees in Our Yard." It had taken her about 20 minutes. I watched as my father, Dr. Richard Anderson, stood by her poster, his arm draped proudly around her shoulders. He spoke in a loud, clear voice to anyone who would listen. "Look at the artistic sensibility. My daughter, she has an eye for nature. She's going to be something special, this one." My mother nodded, smiling, adjusting a ribbon in Isabella's hair. They spent 20 minutes at her poster. When I finally managed to catch my father's eye and gesture him over to my volcano, which was drawing a small crowd of other kids, he sighed. A deep, put-upon sigh. He walked over, gave my project a cursory glance that lasted no more than 3 seconds, and said, "It's messy, Leo. You've got vinegar on the display board." Then he leaned in, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper I was meant to overhear as he spoke to another father standing nearby. "He's a smart kid, I guess, but no focus. All over the place with these hobbies. Not like his sister. She's got the right stuff. Sometimes, you just get a defective item. Nothing you can do." The other father gave a weak, uncomfortable smile and quickly walked away. But I stood there, rooted to the spot, the smell of vinegar suddenly sharp and sickening in my nostrils. A defective item. He said it so casually, like he was talking about a toaster that didn't work. The pride I'd felt in my project curdled into shame. I didn't win a prize that day. After my parents left, I quietly packed up my volcano and threw it in the dumpster behind the school. That was the template for my entire childhood. My successes were ignored or criticized, while Isabella's most mundane achievements were celebrated as proof of her genius. If I got a 98 on a math test, my father would ask where the other 2 points went. When Isabella brought home a B-, he'd praise her for trying so hard in a difficult subject. The house was a shrine to her. Her ballet trophies lined the mantelpiece. Her crayon drawings were framed on the walls. My things, my model rockets and programming books, were confined to my room, the clutter kept out of sight. It wasn't just neglect. It was a systematic campaign to make me feel small. They were programming me to believe I was less than her, less than them, less than everyone. They needed a scapegoat for any imperfection in their perfect family portrait, and I was it. Isabella learned this lesson better than anyone. She saw that she could get away with anything by simply pointing a finger at me. I was the family's built-in excuse, their convenient failure, their defective item. And for years, deep down, a part of me actually believed it. The final, irrevocable break happened during my senior year of high school. The only thing that got me through those years was the burning, desperate hope of escape. The finish line was college, a place far away where the name Anderson didn't mean anything, where I could be judged on my own merits. I poured every ounce of my being into my schoolwork. It was my armor and my weapon. While my father scoffed at my obsessions, I was teaching myself to code, devouring books on economics, and acing every standardized test thrown at me. The acceptance letters started rolling in, not just to state schools, but to top-tier universities. One of them, a prestigious institution on the East Coast, offered me a significant scholarship for their combined business and food technology program. It was everything I wanted. It was a future. I chose my moment carefully. I waited until my father was in his study, a room with mahogany-paneled walls and the smell of old books and self-importance. I held the acceptance letter in my hand. The paper felt heavy, like a verdict. For one last, stupid, hopeful moment, I thought, this is it. This is the proof. He can't deny this. "Dad," I said, my voice steadier than I felt, "I need to talk to you about college. I got into the Manning School of Business." I laid the letter on his large, ornate desk. "They've given me a tuition scholarship, which is great, but I'll still need help with room, board, and fees. I was hoping we could talk about my college fund." He picked up the letter, his eyes scanning it with a look of growing disgust. He didn't read it so much as he judged it. Then he let it drop from his fingers. It fluttered back onto the desk. Business and food technology? He said the words like they were a disease. What in God's name is that? It sounds like something a lunch lady would major in. What a joke. The casual cruelty of it stole my breath. It's not a joke, Dad. It's a massive industry. It's about logistics, nutritional science, creating sustainable food systems. It's innovative. Innovative. He let out a short, barking laugh that wasn't humorous at all. It was a weapon. Let me tell you what's innovative, Leo. 4 generations of Anderson men have been doctors. I am a doctor. Your grandfather was a renowned surgeon. That is our legacy. You were supposed to carry that on to take over the family clinic one day. Instead, you want to go play with packaged macaroni in some laboratory? You want a career that's filthy. It's beneath you. It's a disgrace to this family. His voice was rising, his face turning red. I will not have my son, my name, associated with such a blue-collar, pathetic profession. It's not pathetic. I shot back, my own voice rising. It's my dream, not yours. Your dream? He roared, slamming his fist on the desk, making the letter jump. Your dream is to throw away every advantage you've ever been given. Well, you can forget it. I am not paying 1 single cent for you to go embarrass this family. Not 1 cent from your college fund. Not 1 cent from my pocket. You want to be so independent? Fine. You're on your own. Don't come asking us for anything. As far as I'm concerned, if you walk down this path, you are no longer entitled to any part of our inheritance. My mother had appeared in the doorway, a silent, approving shadow. Your father is right, Leo. You are being incredibly selfish. It was then that something inside me went cold and quiet. The last flicker of hope died. These people would never see me. They would never value me. I was an object to them, a failed extension of their own ego. As my father continued his tirade, listing all my failures and disappointments, I did something almost on instinct. My phone was in my hand. My thumb moved to the side, pressed the power button twice, and the audio recorder started silently. I needed a record. I needed proof that I wasn't crazy, that this venom was real. I recorded the last 3 minutes of the conversation. The insults, the finality, the sound of a door slamming on my future. A few days later, desperate for an ally, I confided in my oldest friend, David. We'd grown up together. I told him everything, my voice cracking as I recounted the fight. He put an arm around my shoulder. Man, that's rough. Your dad's being a real jerk. I felt a sliver of relief. That relief shattered a week later when my mother cornered me. David's mother told me he's very worried about you, she said, her voice dripping with false concern. He says you're being overly dramatic and taking your father's words too much to heart. He thinks you're just going through a rebellious phase. The betrayal was a physical blow. My one friend had run straight back to them, painting me as the unstable, dramatic child, validating their entire narrative. It was in that moment I truly understood. I had no one, just me, and the cold, hard evidence of their cruelty saved as a digital file on my phone. The final, unceremonious shove out of the nest came a few months before graduation. Isabella, who had the academic focus of a hyperactive squirrel, was supposedly studying for her finals. One evening, she threw a monumental tantrum, complete with crocodile tears and slammed doors, screaming that she couldn't possibly be expected to concentrate with my toxic, negative energy in the house. My very presence, she wailed to our mother, was ruining her chances of getting into a good college. It was, of course, a transparent power play, and it worked perfectly. That night, my father appeared in my doorway, not as a father, but as a landlord delivering an eviction notice. His arms were crossed, his expression impassive. Isabella needs a quiet environment. You're a distraction. Pack your bags. I stared at him, dumbfounded. Pack my bags? Where am I supposed to go? I don't particularly care, he said, his voice devoid of any emotion. But to be generous, we've paid for 1 month at the Crestwood Motel over on the highway. After that, you're on your own. Consider it your final severance package. And that was it. I was 18 years old, with 2 battered suitcases, a box of books, and a few $100s I'd managed to save from shoveling snow and mowing lawns. The Crestwood Motel was as grim as it sounded. The air in the room was stale, thick with the ghosts of cigarettes and despair. The bedspread was a scratchy, questionable brown, and the single window looked out onto a crumbling brick wall. As I sat on the lumpy mattress, the reality of my situation crashed down on me. I was homeless, abandoned, but as the initial wave of panic subsided, a strange, unfamiliar feeling bubbled up in its place. Freedom. It was a terrifying, exhilarating freedom. There were no more expectations to fail, no more judgment to endure. My life, for the first time, was a blank page. The first few years were a brutal grind. I was a ghost in the city's underbelly, working jobs that left me bone-tired and smelling of grease and disinfectant. I was a barista at 5 a.m., forcing a smile as I handed out overpriced lattes to people who never made eye contact. I was a package courier in the afternoon, my calves screaming as I sprinted up and down endless flights of stairs. And at night, I was a dishwasher in the back of a small, family-owned Italian restaurant, plunged up to my elbows in hot, murky water, the roar of the kitchen a constant companion. The combined salary from these jobs was a joke. It was barely enough to cover the rent on a tiny, roach-infested apartment I finally found after my month at the motel was up. My diet consisted primarily of instant noodles and the leftover breadsticks from the restaurant. I was constantly tired, constantly hungry, and constantly alone. But in the steamy, chaotic kitchen of that restaurant, I found an unlikely beacon of light. Mr. Henderson, the owner, was a gruff, stocky man in his 60s with flour permanently dusted on his forearms and a surprisingly kind gaze. He saw more than just a dishwasher. He saw me studying during my 10-minute breaks, my nose buried in a used textbook I'd bought for $1. One night, he found me in the back alley, trying to read under the single, flickering security light. "What's the dream, kid?" he asked, his voice gruff. Startled, I told him. I haltingly explained my interest in food science, in business, in building something. I expected him to laugh. Instead, he just nodded slowly. "My grandfather came to this country with nothing," he said. "He started with a pushcart. It's in the blood, the building. You got it, kid. I can see it." From that day on, he became my mentor. He taught me about sourcing ingredients, about managing inventory, about profit and loss. He gave me responsibilities, letting me help with ordering, even trusting me to lock up a few nights a week. He gave me respect, something I was starving for even more than food. He was more of a father to me in those 2 years than my own had ever been. I saved every single dollar I could. I enrolled in night classes at the local community college, my eyelids feeling like they had lead weights on them as I struggled to pay attention after a 16-hour workday. It was a lonely, relentless climb. But then, one day, an envelope arrived. It was thick, professional, with the crest of the university I had dreamed of. With trembling hands, I tore it open. Acceptance. As a transfer student. Based on my perfect 4.0 at community college and the passionate, desperate essay I had poured my soul into. Sitting there, in my tiny apartment, holding that letter, I broke down and cried. It wasn't just paper. It was a validation. It was a key. It was proof that I could be more than the label they had given me. I had done it. Alone. Stepping onto the university campus was like landing on another planet. It was a world of manicured lawns, historic brick buildings, and the palpable hum of ambition. For the first time, I was surrounded by people who were genuinely excited about learning, who debated economic theories in the dining hall and pulled all-nighters in the library out of passion, not just obligation. But I still felt like an imposter. I was older than most of the other students in my year. While they talked about summer trips to Europe and the cars their parents had bought them for graduation, I was working 30 hours a week at a campus coffee shop to make sure I could eat. I carried the scars of my past like an invisible backpack, the weight of them making me slouch when I wanted to stand tall. I kept to myself, head down, focusing on the only two things I could control: my grades and my job. And then, in the sterile, intimidating environment of an advanced organic chemistry lab, I met Clara. She was brilliant. She moved with a quiet confidence, her brow furrowed in concentration as she precisely measured reagents, her notes a masterpiece of neat, color-coded diagrams. I was struggling with a complex reaction mechanism, my own notes a chaotic scrawl of confusion. I must have sighed in frustration, because she looked over from her station, a small, amused smile on her face. "You're trying to brute force it," she said, her voice clear and calm over the hum of the ventilation hoods. "It's more elegant than that. Look at the stereochemistry." She leaned over, her hair smelling faintly of almond shampoo, and pointed with the end of her pen to a bond in my diagram. "If you flip this intermediate, the whole cascade resolves itself." And just like that, it clicked. The mental wall I'd been slamming my head against crumbled. "Oh," I said, stunned. "Wow. Thank you." "Don't mention it," she said, her smile widening. "We're lab partners. We're supposed to keep each other from blowing things up." That was the beginning. We started studying together. I discovered she was pre-med, sharp as a whip, but also kind and funny, with a laugh that made me forget how tired I was. She never asked about my family or why I never went home for the holidays. She didn't seem to care that my winter coat was thin and worn or that I always ordered the cheapest thing on the menu when our study group went out. She seemed interested in my ideas, in the way my mind worked. The turning point came one cold November night. We were the last two people in a quiet corner of the library, the rest of the campus dark and silent. We were supposed to be studying for a midterm, but we'd somehow started talking about our futures. She spoke about her dream of becoming a surgeon, her passion for helping people. Then she turned to me. "What about you, Leo? What drives you?" I usually dodged personal questions with vague, non-committal answers. But looking at her, with her genuine curiosity and the complete absence of judgment in her eyes, I made a split-second decision to take a risk. I decided to tell the truth. My voice was low, hesitant at first, as I told her everything. I told her about being the defective item, about the science fair, about the constant comparisons to Isabella. I told her about the fight over the college fund, about being called filthy, about being kicked out of my own home. I laid the whole ugly, painful story out on the table between us, fully expecting her to look at me with pity, or worse, to slowly back away from the guy with so much baggage. When I finished, the silence in the library felt immense. I couldn't bring myself to look at her. I just stared at the grain of the wooden table, my heart pounding. Then, I felt her hand cover mine. It was warm and steady. I looked up. There were no tears in her eyes, no pity, just a fierce, unwavering strength. "Leo," she said, her voice soft but solid as rock. "That's not a family. That's a house of horrors. And the fact that you are sitting here, acing some of the hardest classes at this university after going through all of that doesn't make you defective. It makes you the strongest, most resilient person I have ever met." In that moment, a dam inside me that had been holding back years of unshed tears finally broke. It wasn't a loud, sobbing breakdown, just a silent stream of tears rolling down my face. It was the first time anyone had ever validated my reality. The first time anyone had looked at my deepest wounds and seen strength instead of weakness. She didn't try to fix me. She just sat there with me, her hand firmly on mine, until I was done. She was the light at the end of a tunnel I didn't even realize I was still in. A few years after we graduated, Clara and I stood before a justice of the peace and promised to be each other's safe harbor for the rest of our lives. It was a simple, perfect day. Our only guests were a handful of our closest friends and Clara's parents, Dr. Alistair Finch and his wife, who had welcomed me into their family with an open, genuine warmth that still felt like a miracle to me. Life settled into a new, wonderful rhythm. Clara began her grueling but rewarding residency at Anderson General. I took a job in logistics for a national food distribution company, climbing the ladder with a speed that surprised everyone but me. I understood supply chains and efficiency in a way that felt intuitive. For the first time, I had a respectable salary, health insurance, and the quiet stability I had craved my entire life. We weren't wealthy, but we were a team, building a life together. A life that was a million miles away from the cold, transactional world I grew up in. Then our son Noah was born, and the entire universe tilted on its axis. The first time I held him, this tiny, perfect human being with a thatch of dark hair just like mine, I felt a love so fierce, so primal it was terrifying. It was a protective, all-consuming love that filled up all the broken, empty spaces inside me. I looked at his sleeping face and made a silent, sacred vow. I would never be my father. This child would be seen, heard, and loved unconditionally every single day of his life. He would never, ever have to wonder if he was good enough. For the first 2 years, life was a beautiful, sleep-deprived chaos. But then Noah started getting sick. Started subtly, he was always tired, he wasn't hitting his growth milestones. Then it became more serious. He was listless, prone to infections, and in and out of the pediatrician's office, then the hospital. The months that followed were a blur of fear. We were shuffled from specialist to specialist, enduring endless tests, each one coming back with frustratingly inconclusive results. Watching my son suffer, so small and helpless, was a unique and exquisite form of torture. Finally, a brilliant geneticist gave us a diagnosis: a rare metabolic disorder. In simple terms, his body couldn't process certain proteins and fats. If left unmanaged, it could lead to severe developmental issues and even be life-threatening. The treatment? A lifelong, extremely specialized, medically tailored diet. Suddenly, our world narrowed to a single, terrifying focus: keeping Noah healthy. The prescribed nutritional formulas were astronomically expensive, even with our insurance. And worse, they were unpalatable. They were gray, medicinal-smelling concoctions that Noah, understandably, hated. Every meal became a heart-wrenching battle of wills, trying to coax our sick child to consume the very thing that was supposed to make him better. Clara was working impossible hours, trying to save other people's children, while ours was struggling at home. The stress was immense. One night, after another failed 2-hour attempt to get Noah to finish his bottle, I hit my breaking point. I sat at the kitchen table, my head in my hands, feeling utterly helpless. Then, a spark of defiance lit up in the dark. I wasn't helpless. I had a degree in business and food technology. I understood this. I dug out my old textbooks. I turned our kitchen into a makeshift laboratory. I spent every spare moment, late into the night after Noah was asleep, researching. I read dense medical journals on metabolic pathways, cross-referencing them with my knowledge of food chemistry and production. I started experimenting, ordering specialized protein isolates and carbohydrate blends online. I was obsessed, driven by a father's desperate love. I was going to create something for my son that was not only nutritionally perfect for his condition but also something he would actually want to eat. After dozens of failures that ended up in the sink, I finally created a formula. Using a base of hydrolyzed rice protein and a unique blend of MCT oils, flavored with natural vanilla bean, I made something that was not only safe for him but tasted, remarkably, like a sweet, creamy milkshake. The first time I offered it to him, I held my breath. He eyed the bottle suspiciously, then took a tentative sip. His eyes widened. He took another sip, then another, and then he drained the entire bottle without a fight. It was the first full meal he'd had in weeks. Clara and I just stood there and cried. The change in Noah over the next few months was nothing short of miraculous. He started gaining weight. He had energy. He started laughing again. The light came back into his eyes. One evening, as we were watching Noah happily chugging his special milkshake, Clara put her arm around my shoulders. "You know," she said quietly, her voice thick with emotion, "what you did here in this kitchen. It's a miracle, Leo. There are thousands of other parents out there, going through this same nightmare. This could help so many people." Her words hit me like a bolt of lightning. My father had called my passion a filthy career, but in that moment, I saw its true purpose. He had wanted me to be a doctor, to heal people one at a time. But maybe, just maybe, I could heal them by the thousands. I could ease the suffering of families just like mine. That was the night NutriHealth Solutions was truly born. I took our entire savings, every penny we had, wrote a business plan on our kitchen table, and poured every ounce of my being into making my son's miracle a mission. The next 5 years were a whirlwind. Launching NutriHealth Solutions was the hardest thing I'd ever done. It was a blur of 100-hour work weeks, pitching to skeptical investors, navigating the labyrinth of FDA regulations, and celebrating small victories like our first successful production run. Clara was my rock through it all, working her own demanding schedule as a physician and then coming home to be a mom and my #1 supporter, often proofreading my proposals late into the night. Slowly, painstakingly, we grew. We went from my kitchen table to a small, rented lab space, then to our own modest production facility. We got our first products into a few local clinics, then a regional hospital. I was a CEO, a title that felt both surreal and deeply earned. I was a husband and a father. The scared, broken kid who had been kicked out of his home felt like a character in a book I'd read a long time ago. My old family was a ghost, a phantom limb that sometimes ached but was no longer attached. I hadn't spoken to a single one of them since the day I left. I heard disconnected whispers through the city's small, interconnected medical community. That Isabella had dropped out of the expensive university they'd sent her to, that my father's private clinic was struggling to keep patients, but I walled it all off. They were strangers, and their lives had no bearing on mine. Then, one crisp autumn afternoon, the invitation arrived in the mail. It was an ostentatious thing, thick, cream-colored cardstock with shimmering gold calligraphy. Isabella was getting married, to a Dr. Markham Vance. Of course, it had to be a doctor. It was the only currency my family valued. My immediate, visceral reaction was to march it straight to the shredder. The thought of being in the same room with them, of breathing the same air, made my stomach clench into a tight, acid-filled knot. The idea of subjecting Clara to their poisonous atmosphere was even worse. "Absolutely not," I said, tossing the invitation onto the kitchen counter as if it were contaminated. "We're not going. End of story." Clara picked it up, her expression thoughtful as she read it. She didn't argue. She just asked a simple question. "Why not? Why not?" I laughed, a short, bitter sound. "Are you serious? Why would I voluntarily walk into the lion's den? So they can all stand around and whisper about the family failure? So my father can look down his nose at me and my filthy career? So Isabella can parade her new doctor husband in front of me as her ultimate prize? No, thank you. I'm done with their games. We owe them nothing." "You're right," she said calmly, which surprised me. "We owe them nothing. But this isn't about them, Leo. This has never been about them. This is about you." She closed the distance between us, her eyes searching mine. "For all these years, you've worked so hard to build this incredible life, to become this amazing man. But there's a small part of you that is still that 18-year-old boy they threw out. He's still scared of them. He's still hurt by them. And by avoiding them, you're letting them keep their power over him." Her words were gentle, but they landed with surgical precision. "We don't have to go for them," she continued, taking my hands in hers. "We can go for us. We can walk into that hotel not as the broken kid they rejected, but as Leo Anderson, the CEO of a successful company, a respected husband, a devoted father. We don't have to engage. We don't have to fight. We just have to be present in our own success, in our own happiness. It's about showing yourself that you've won. It's about closing that chapter, not for their sake, but for yours." I hated that she was right. I had built walls around that part of my past, but the ghosts were still inside those walls with me. The thought of facing them was terrifying, but the idea of being afraid of them for the rest of my life was even worse. "Besides," she added, a sly smile playing on her lips, "I heard from my dad that this Dr. Vance is trying to get a promotion to a department head position at Anderson General. It might be interesting for him to meet the family." The irony was delicious. The thought of walking in there not as a pariah, but as the son-in-law of the hospital's director. It was a shield I'd never had before. I took a deep, steadying breath. "Okay," I said, my voice firmer than I felt. "Okay, let's go to the wedding." Walking into the Grand Astoria's lobby was like stepping into a perfectly constructed illusion. Everything was designed to whisper wealth and class. The air was thick with the scent of lilies, a flower I've always found beautiful but funereal. People in expensive suits and jewel-toned dresses drifted around, sipping champagne and making conversation that sounded like the gentle buzzing of bees. It was a world built on surfaces, and I knew that beneath the polished veneer, the same old rot was present. Clara looked magnificent in a sapphire blue dress that made her eyes sparkle. Her hand on my arm was a warm, steady pressure, a constant reminder that I wasn't alone. We moved through the crowd, offering polite nods to strangers, navigating the social currents as if we belonged there. I spotted them almost immediately, holding court near the grand staircase. My father, Richard, stood ramrod straight, a glass of scotch in hand, looking every bit the proud patriarch. My mother, Eleanor, was at his side, wearing a dress that was too tight and a smile that was even tighter. And at the center of it all was Isabella, a confection of white lace and smug satisfaction, basking in the attention. With her was the groom, Mark, who looked less like a man in love and more like a man who had just closed a very successful business deal. Our strategy was avoidance. We intended to mingle with a few of Clara's colleagues from the hospital, make a brief appearance, and then slip out before the main reception. But in a room full of sharks, smelling blood in the water is a basic instinct. Our presence was the blood. I saw my mother lean over and whisper something to my Aunt Carol. Carol's eyes widened slightly before she glanced over at me, her face a mask of practiced pity. I felt my father's gaze on me, a brief, cold, dismissive flick, the human equivalent of brushing away a piece of lint. It didn't take long for the direct encounters to begin. The groom, Mark, detached himself from Isabella's side and began working the room, shaking hands and exuding the slick charm of a politician. When he reached us, Clara made the introductions. Mark, congratulations. I'd like you to meet my husband, Leo. Mark's eyes did a quick, dismissive scan of me, from my shoes to my haircut. It was the kind of look that assessed and found wanting in a single second. His handshake was weak, his palm clammy. Leo, right? Isabella mentioned you might show up. Good of you to come. He turned his attention back to Clara. Clara, good to see you. I was just talking to Dr. Sterling about the new cardiology wing. Big things happening at Anderson General. He was shamelessly networking, using his own wedding as a job interview. He didn't ask me a single question, didn't even pretend to be interested. I was an irrelevant accessory to his wife's important sister-in-law. He was about to move on when he paused, turning back to me as an afterthought. So what is it you do, Leo? Something with food, right? The question was phrased to be as belittling as possible. Before I could formulate a reply that wasn't dripping with sarcasm, Clara answered for me, her voice smooth as silk. Leo is the founder and CEO of his own company. Mark grunted, a non-committal sound that clearly communicated his lack of impressiveness. Right? Well, enjoy the open bar. God knows my father-in-law is paying enough for it. He winked, clapped another doctor on the back, and disappeared into the crowd, leaving the insult hanging in the air. A few minutes later, Aunt Carol materialized at my elbow, her hand landing on my arm with a gentle, cloying pressure. Leo, dear, she cooed, her voice a conspiratorial whisper. I am just so glad you decided to come. It means the world to your mother, you know. She carries so much pain about all this. She just has a hard time showing it. It was the same old song, the family anthem of enabling. She seems fine, Aunt Carol, I said, my voice flat. Oh, you know, she sighed, dabbing at a non-existent tear with a lace handkerchief. It's just, she and your father, they had such specific dreams for you. The clinic, the legacy. It's hard for parents to let go of that. They just want what's best for you, even if they don't know how to say it. What they wanted was a copy of themselves, I said, more sharply than I intended. I'm not that. I'm sorry if that's a disappointment. Carol patted my arm again, her smile tight with discomfort. Well, we all have our crosses to bear. Just try to be pleasant, dear. For Isabella's sake. It's her special day. She drifted away, leaving me with the familiar, bitter taste of her passive-aggressive poison. The tension was a physical thing, a tightening in my chest, a prickling on my skin. We were exhibits in their private zoo, the troubled branch of the family tree put on display. As I stood by the bar, trying to get a glass of sparkling water, a man in a sharp suit approached me. He looked vaguely familiar. "Excuse me," he said, his brow furrowed in concentration. "I hate to be that guy, but you look incredibly familiar. Have we met?" "I don't think so," I said politely. "I'm Leo Anderson." His eyes lit up with recognition. "Anderson, of course. Noah's dad, Dr. Evans. I was a resident on the pediatric metabolic team for a while. How is your son doing?" "He's a fantastic kid." For the first time that evening, a genuine smile broke through my practiced facade. "He's doing great, actually. Thriving. Thanks for asking." "That's wonderful to hear," Dr. Evans said warmly. "And hey, it's a pleasure to finally meet the man behind the myth. The dietitians at our hospital are obsessed with NutriHealth. They call your pediatric line a game changer. Seriously, you're a bit of a legend in our department." I felt a warmth spread through my chest, a stark contrast to the icy reception from my own family. "I'm just glad we can help," I murmured. "Small world, isn't it?" he said with a grin, just as his wife beckoned him from across the room. He excused himself and walked away, leaving me with a strange, powerful sense of foreshadowing. The world was indeed a very small place, and inside this glittering, gilded cage, it was about to implode. The inevitable confrontation happened exactly where I knew it would, in the wide-open, very public space of the lobby. After excusing myself for a moment, I walked right into the ambush. Isabella's voice, sharp and practiced in its cruelty, calling me a defective item. Her demand for security. My parents' silent, damning endorsement of her actions. It was a perfectly staged piece of family theater, and I was the unwilling star. And then, Clara arrived, her presence shifting the very atmosphere around us. She slid her arm through mine, a simple gesture of ownership and defiance. My mother, Eleanor, her eyes sweeping over Clara's elegant dress with a flicker of jealousy, let out a condescending little laugh. "Oh, and you must be the wife. How wonderful that you support him in his endeavors." The word hung in the air, dripping with sarcasm. "I suppose I should feel sorry for you, dear. It must be so difficult, being married to a man who couldn't even manage to get a proper education. A high school graduate. How quaint." Isabella, emboldened by our mother's attack, joined in, her voice rising for the benefit of the fascinated onlookers. "Is that your strategy, Leo? Marry a doctor to try and buy your way into a world you don't belong in? It's pathetic. You can dress up in a nice suit, but you can't erase what you are." The cruelty was so performative, so designed to inflict maximum public humiliation, that it was almost breathtaking. I could feel the stares of the other guests like insects crawling on my skin. They were watching a public execution, and my family were the gleeful executioners. The groom, Mark, saw his cue to play the White Knight. He strode forward, placing a proprietary hand on Isabella's arm, as if protecting her from my contaminating presence. "All right, that's enough," he said, but his words were aimed directly at me and Clara. His voice was loud, commanding. "I think there's been a mistake. People like you clearly don't belong in a place like this. Why don't you just leave quietly before you embarrass yourselves any further?" "People like us?" Clara repeated. Her voice had dropped, losing its warmth and becoming dangerously quiet, like the air before a lightning strike. "Please, Mark, enlighten me. What kind of people are we?" Mark sneered, a truly ugly expression on his handsome face. He gestured vaguely in my direction. "You know what kind. Underachievers. People who don't have the discipline or the breeding to make something of themselves. I'm a surgeon. Isabella comes from a family of respected doctors. We have standards. This is a celebration of success, not a charity case for failures." My father puffed out his chest, his expression one of grave solemnity, as if he were delivering a tragic diagnosis. "The boy is right. You have no place here, Leo. You made your choice years ago when you decided to throw away your future for that filthy hobby of yours instead of a real career. You chose this life. Now have the decency to live with it somewhere else." The security guard, a large man with a weary face, had now reached us. He stood beside me, his presence a solid block of impending action. "Sir," he said, his voice a low rumble. "Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to come with me." The red mist of pure, unadulterated rage was starting to cloud my vision. Every muscle in my body was coiled tight. All the years of biting my tongue, of swallowing the insults, of absorbing the quiet dismissals. It was all boiling up inside me, a volcanic pressure demanding release. I opened my mouth, ready to unleash a decade of fury, to burn their perfect little world to the ground with words. But before I could utter a single syllable, another voice, calm and laced with indisputable authority, cut through the charged air. "Is there a problem here?" The voice was not loud, but it silenced the entire lobby. The voice belonged to Dr. Alistair Finch, my father-in-law, the universally respected, slightly feared, and deeply influential director of Anderson General Hospital. He was walking towards our tense little circle, and beside him, looking concerned, was Dr. Evans, the friendly resident from the pediatric team. The transformation in my father was instantaneous and grotesque. His arrogant, judgmental posture melted away, replaced by a fawning, obsequious demeanor. He practically bowed. "Dr. Finch, pleasure to see you." No problem at all. Just a minor disturbance. A wedding crasher got a little confused. We were just having him removed." Dr. Finch came to a stop in front of us. He raised a single eloquent eyebrow. His gaze moved from my father's nervous face to me, where I stood with Clara's arm still linked through mine. A slow, knowing smile spread across his face, and it was not a friendly one. "A wedding crasher? Richard, that's a remarkably poor way to refer to your own son. And," he added, his voice dropping an octave, "a terrible way to speak about my son-in-law. You could have heard a crystal champagne flute drop on the marble floor from 100 feet away." The silence was absolute. My father's jaw, which had been set in a firm line of authority, simply fell open. My mother went the color of her pale lavender dress. Isabella stared, her perfect makeup suddenly looking like a brittle mask about to crack. Dr. Evans, bless his heart, was still blissfully unaware of the family soap opera unfolding. He just beamed at me, seeing an opportunity. "There you are, Mr. Anderson. I was just telling Dr. Vance here," he said, clapping a completely stunned Mark on the shoulder, "that a partnership is a must. Your company, NutriHealth Solutions, is doing revolutionary work. Our hospital's board is incredibly impressed with your 5-year growth plan and your new pediatric line. We want in." Mark looked as if he'd been struck by lightning. He stared at me, then at Dr. Evans, then back at me. "NutriHealth? He runs that company. He's the CEO." Dr. Finch placed a heavy, paternal hand on my shoulder, a gesture of ownership and protection that was so foreign and so welcome it almost made my knees weak. "That's right," he said, his voice resonating with power. "My son-in-law, Leo Anderson, one of the most brilliant and driven entrepreneurs in the medical food industry I have ever had the pleasure of knowing." He then fixed Mark with a gaze as cold and sharp as a scalpel. "And you, Dr. Vance, I would suggest you choose your next words with extreme care. Your application for the department head promotion at my hospital is, after all, still sitting on my desk. And your conduct tonight has been revealing." The color drained from Mark's face. He looked like he was going to be sick right there on the pristine floor. The entire power dynamic of the room had been reversed with a few quiet sentences. It was so perfect, so complete, that I almost wanted to leave it there. But one final piece of the charade needed to be shattered. I turned my attention to Isabella, who was watching her fiancé's public humiliation with wide, terrified eyes. "You know, Isabella," I said, my voice calm and steady in the ringing silence, "you talk a big game about education and standards. Which is funny, because I have a distinct memory of you dropping out of middle school, not graduating with honors from that prestigious university you've been telling everyone about. Mark whirled on her, his voice a choked whisper. What? Is that true? Tell me he's lying. No, he's a liar. He's always been a liar, she shrieked, her carefully constructed composure shattering into a million pieces. It's an easy thing to verify, I said simply. We could call the university registrar. Or perhaps one of your supposed professors. What was his name again? Dr. Albright. As Mark, desperate to salvage some piece of reality, fumbled for his phone, Isabella completely lost control. She let out a guttural, animalistic scream of pure rage and panic. She lunged, not at me, but at him, snatching the phone from his hand. And with a furious cry, she hurled it with all her might against the marble floor, where it shattered into 100 glittering pieces of glass and plastic. The lobby was silent, save for Isabella's ragged, heaving breaths. The show was over. The beautiful, perfect golden child was gone, replaced by a wild, cornered animal, exposed for all the world to see. This was the moment everything changed, the moment I finally took back control of my own story. Thank you for sticking with me to this point. You guys are amazing. If you could, please help me out by liking this video and commenting the number 1 down below, just so I know you made it this far with me. It doesn't just help more people find this story. It lets me know that my experiences mean something to someone out there. Your support is the biggest reason I continue to share the rest of my journey. In the deafening, shocked silence that followed Isabella's violent outburst, we simply turned and walked away. Dr. Finch, Clara, and I, we didn't hurry. We walked with a calm, deliberate pace that felt more powerful than any angry retort could have been. We left the wreckage of my sister's wedding, and my sister's life, behind us on that cold marble floor. No one said a word to us as we left. The guests parted like the Red Sea. The security guard who had been ready to physically remove me just moments before now stared at the floor, his face a deep, embarrassed red. The cool night air outside the hotel felt like a baptism. It washed away the suffocating atmosphere of the lobby, and for the first time in what felt like a lifetime, I could breathe deeply. The valet, sensing the shift in power, practically tripped over himself to bring Dr. Finch's car around. The ride home was quiet, but it was a comfortable, peaceful silence. It was the silence of a battle won, of a long war finally over. Clara held my hand, her thumb tracing small, reassuring circles on my skin. Dr. Finch drove, occasionally glancing at me in the rearview mirror, a look of quiet, profound pride in his eyes. There was nothing that needed to be said. The truth had been spoken not by me, but by the life I had built. When we arrived home, I went straight to Noah's room. The soft glow of his dinosaur nightlight cast gentle shadows on the walls. He was sleeping soundly, one arm thrown over his stuffed bear, his breathing deep and even. I stood there for a long time, just watching him, this perfect, innocent boy who was the reason for everything. All the struggle, all the pain, all the lonely years of hard work. It had all been a long, winding road that led me here, to this moment, to this family. My real family. The one I had chosen, and the one that had chosen me back. A few days later, my phone rang. It was an unknown number, but I had a sinking feeling I knew who it was. I let it go to voicemail. The message that appeared a moment later was from my father. A few hours later, curiosity, or perhaps a need for finality, got the better of me. I listened to it. His voice was unrecognizable. The booming, authoritative tone was gone, replaced by a thin, reedy sound, like an old recording. Leo, son, it's your father. We need to talk. There have been some terrible misunderstandings. Your mother and I, we're sorry. Please, just call me back. The apology was a ghost, a hollow echo of a word that had lost all its meaning. It wasn't born from remorse for the years of cruelty. It was born from the public humiliation of discovering they had backed the wrong horse. They weren't sorry for how they had treated me. They were sorry they had miscalculated my worth. I deleted the voicemail, but he was persistent. The next day he called again. This time I answered, "What do you want?" I asked, my voice devoid of emotion. "Leo, thank you for answering," he said, a desperate edge to his voice. "Listen, son, I know we've had our differences, but blood is blood. Your sister. The wedding, it was a disaster. Mark called the whole thing off. He's threatening to sue her for the cost of the event. She's not in a good way. We're in a mess, Leo. A real mess." I stood by the window in my office, looking out at the sprawling city. My city. A city where I had arrived with nothing and had built a life. "That sounds like a problem for your family," I said. "It has nothing to do with me." "But you are our family," he pleaded. We need your help." And there it was, the real reason for the call. I took a deep breath, and the words I had needed to say for more than a decade finally came. Not in anger, but in a calm, cold certainty. "No," I said, "you are not my family. You stopped being my family the day you called me defective and threw me out into the street. My family is at home, waiting for me. You two are just strangers I used to know." There was a stunned silence on the other end of the line. "I am going to establish a boundary now," I continued, my voice as steady as steel. "Our lives are no longer connected. Do not call me. Do not contact my wife or my son. Do not come to my office or my home. We are finished." I didn't wait for a reply. I ended the call. Then I blocked his number. And my mother's. And my aunt's. I systematically erased them from my digital life. The door to my past, which had been left ajar for so long, was now closed, locked, and bolted shut, and all I felt was peace. The year following the wedding was like stepping out of a long, gray winter and into a brilliant spring. The confrontation, as painful as it was in the moment, had acted as a catalyst, clearing away the wreckage of the past and opening up a clear path to the future. The story of the dramatic implosion at the Anderson Vance wedding became the stuff of legend in the city's tight-knit medical community. It turned out that Mark Vance wasn't just arrogant. He was also being investigated for unethical patient referrals and overbilling. My father-in-law's public and very cold dismissal of him was the final straw. His application for a promotion at Anderson General was, of course, rejected, and his once promising career hit a brick wall. For NutriHealth Solutions, the effect was the polar opposite. The buzz was incredible. Dr. Evans, true to his word, championed our company within Anderson General. We quickly negotiated and secured a major, multi-year contract to be the sole provider of specialized nutritional products for their entire hospital network. That single contract was a game changer. It gave us the capital and the credibility to expand nationally. Other hospital systems, seeing the endorsement from a prestigious institution like Anderson General, quickly followed suit. Our sales didn't just grow. They exploded. Within a year, we had to move into a new, state-of-the-art production facility 4 times the size of our old one. We hired over 100 new employees, scientists, technicians, sales representatives, logistics experts. One of the proudest days of my life was when I was able to implement a company-wide benefits package that included a generous retirement plan and a significantly higher starting salary than the industry average. I remembered what it was like to count every penny, and I was determined to build a company that valued its people. I went from being a niche entrepreneur to a recognized leader in the field of medical nutrition. I was invited to speak at conferences, to sit on panels, to share my story. The first time I stood on a massive stage, under bright lights, looking out at a sea of faces, I told them the story of NutriHealth's origins. I spoke about a father's love for his sick son and the desperate late-night experiments in a home kitchen that grew into a multi-million-dollar company. I didn't mention the abuse or the rejection. I didn't need to. The success was the only answer that mattered. The filthy career my father had so viciously mocked was now improving and even saving the lives of thousands of patients across the country. But the greatest success, the most profound victory, wasn't measured in profit margins or contracts. It was measured in the sound of my son's laughter. With the company's success, we could afford the absolute best specialists, the most cutting-edge treatments to complement his diet. Noah thrived. He joined a little league baseball team. He learned to ride a bike. He was a happy, healthy, vibrant kid, full of life and joy. Seeing him run across a field, his face flushed with excitement, was a dividend more valuable than any stock portfolio. Clara and I were stronger than ever. We were true partners, celebrating the victories and navigating the challenges of our growing business and busy family life together. We bought a beautiful house with a sprawling backyard where Noah and his friends could play. We filled its rooms with warmth, books, music, and love. All the things my childhood home had been devoid of. I was finally living a life that was not just successful but meaningful. I had built a new legacy from scratch, one that had nothing to do with the Anderson name and everything to do with the values I had chosen for myself. Resilience, compassion, and unconditional love. While my life was reaching new heights, the world my former family had so carefully constructed was collapsing under the weight of its own toxicity. I didn't seek out the information, but it trickled back to me anyway, through the inevitable gossip that travels through shared circles. After Mark Vance publicly and humiliatingly broke off the engagement, Isabella's downward spiral accelerated. Her plan to marry into a secure, prestigious life had blown up in her face. Humiliated and furious, she became reckless. She was caught having a loud, very public affair with a married surgeon. The surgeon's wife, a formidable woman with a lot of friends and a very active social media presence, decided against a quiet divorce. Instead, she opted for a campaign of total annihilation, posting screenshots of texts and photos that laid bare the entire sordid affair for the whole city to see. The scandal was the final straw for my parents. Their reputation, already tarnished, was now in ashes. In a desperate, pathetic attempt to salvage their own social standing, they did to their golden child what they had once done to me. They cut her off. They publicly disowned her, casting her out to save themselves. The last I heard, Isabella was living in a different state, estranged from everyone she knew, her future a blank and desolate page. My father's clinic, already struggling, went into a terminal decline. The story of his cruelty to me, combined with the public implosion of his daughter's life, created a narrative of a dysfunctional, toxic family. Patients, especially those with children, began to quietly find other doctors. His practice, once a source of immense pride and income, bled money until he was forced to sell it for a fraction of its worth. At his age, with his reputation in tatters, finding another position was impossible. The inevitable confrontation came on a gray, drizzly Tuesday afternoon. My assistant's voice came through the intercom, hesitant. "Mr. Anderson, there are 2 people here to see you. A Richard and Eleanor Anderson. They don't have an appointment, but they insist it's an emergency." A cold, heavy feeling settled in the pit of my stomach. "Send them in," I said. They looked like faded photographs of the people I remembered. Their expensive clothes hung on them, seeming to mock their shrunken, defeated postures. The arrogance and judgment were gone, replaced by a raw, undisguised desperation. They sat in the plush leather chairs opposite my large mahogany desk, a desk much larger than my father's had ever been, and looked utterly out of place. After a long, uncomfortable silence, my father finally spoke, his voice thin and raspy. "Leo, we've made some terrible mistakes." He couldn't meet my eyes, staring instead at a spot on my desk. "The clinic is gone. We lost everything. Your sister, she took a lot of money from our accounts before she disappeared. We're in trouble. The bank is going to foreclose on the house." He finally looked up, and his eyes were those of a beaten man. "We need your help. We need $120,000 to pay off the debts." There it was. Not an apology. Not a plea for reconciliation. A bill. They had come to the son they had disowned for a financial bailout. I leaned back in my chair, looking at these 2 strangers who had given me life and then done their best to take it away. I thought about the cold motel room, the burn of dish soap on my chapped hands, the constant, gnawing hunger of those early years. I thought about the love and support I had received from Clara's family, who owed me nothing. I thought about my son sleeping safely in his bed. I leaned forward, placing my hands flat on the desk. "No," I said. The word was quiet, but it landed with the force of a physical blow. My mother began to weep, thin, reedy sobs. "But we're your family. How can you be so cruel?" "Cruel?" I asked, and for the first time, a spark of the old anger flared. "You want to talk about cruel? You threw your own son out on the street. You called him worthless his entire life. You sat by and watched your daughter try to have me thrown out of her wedding. That was cruel." I stood up, the meeting officially over. "The family you're talking about doesn't exist anymore. You destroyed it. Now, please leave my office." They stared at me, shocked into silence by the finality in my voice. Then, wordlessly, they stood and shuffled out, leaving me alone in the quiet of my success. I didn't feel triumph. I didn't feel anger. I just felt the profound, quiet relief of a debt finally being marked paid in full. Today, as I stand here in my office, the city lights are beginning to twinkle on, creating a sprawling galaxy outside my window. On my desk, there's a framed photograph taken just last month on a family trip to the beach. Clara is laughing, her head thrown back, and a 7-year-old Noah is on my shoulders. His face a perfect picture of pure, unadulterated joy. That photograph is not just a picture. It's my compass. It's my anchor. It's my entire world. For so much of my life, I was suffocated by the concept of legacy. There was the legacy of 4 generations of doctors that I was supposed to uphold. Then there was the legacy of failure and disappointment that I was told I was destined to become. I spent years running from that word, hating the weight of it. But now, standing here, in this life that I have built with my own 2 hands, I finally understand what it truly means. A legacy isn't some heirloom that's handed down to you, something you are obligated to maintain. It's not determined by the name you carry or the house you grew up in. A legacy is something you build. It is the sum of your choices, day after day, year after year. My parents made their choices. They chose pride over compassion. They chose judgment over acceptance. They chose the illusion of a perfect family over the messy, beautiful reality of unconditional love. And their legacy is a broken home, 2 estranged children, and a retirement filled with bitterness and regret. I chose a different path. I chose to believe in myself when no one else on earth did. I chose to turn the deepest pain of my life into my greatest purpose. I chose to build a family founded on a bedrock of trust, respect, and unwavering support. I chose to create something that didn't just make money, but that genuinely helped people, that eased the burden of families going through their darkest hours. My legacy isn't my last name carved onto a clinic sign. It's in the vibrant health of my son. It's in the loving, laughing eyes of my wife. It's in the quiet gratitude of a parent who can finally see their child thrive. The past is a powerful thing, but it does not have to be a prison. We are not the labels other people try to brand us with. We are the authors of our own stories, and we get to choose how the chapters unfold. My story is no longer about rejection and pain. It's a story of resilience, of love, and of the profound, quiet freedom that comes from choosing, every single day, exactly who you are meant to be. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it resonated with you in some way. Have you ever had to deal with a similar situation, where you had to choose between the family you were given and the peace you deserved? I'd be honored to read your story in the comments below. And please, don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss what I have to share next.